Hello, I'm Trina. Welcome to my cucina, and today we are baking a basic white artisanal loaf of bread. It is the perfect starting point for beginners. So let's get started with what we all need to make this bread. This recipe is incredibly simple, and it's all from the wonderful book, which is how I got started. It's called Bread Baking for Beginners by Ohara, and she really goes into detail about everything you need to start with the most simplest of bread, and this is that recipe. This is that most simplest one. So you start out with some basic all-purpose flour. I love the King Arthur brand, and you need about 500 grams of that. Then you need instant yeast. I buy it in bulk and measure it out, and you need about 8 grams for this recipe. You also need some salt. I go with some sea salt, and for this recipe, it's about 10 grams. And then you'll need water. So the water and the yeast are going to be the things you use first. I don't have it measured out because the temperature is important. So for this case, I do about 80 to 85 degrees of water. And in the book, she explains that depending on the temperature inside your home, you should adjust that. Our house is typically around that 70-degree mark. Today is a lovely day. It might be a little bit warmer, but I'm still going to keep it right at about 80 to 85 degrees. I use a 2-cup measuring because you need about 375 grams of water for this recipe. And I just put it on a digital scale, tear out the weight of the cup. Then I use a thermometer and get the temperature of the water and then just weigh out 375 grams. And that's the actual ingredients for the recipe and the start of the equipment. The other equipment I would highly recommend is some sort of a kitchen scraper. This will come in handy in a couple of points. And then just having a spoon nearby for when you're measuring things or when you just need to grab some things. You'll need some sort of a mixing tub or some sort of mixing situation. My KitchenAid bowl, my KitchenAid mixer bowl was the thing I used for a long time. And that plus like a towel, it works great. I bought this tub as I got a little more advanced, and this is what I'm going to use today, especially because it's clear and you can see what's inside of it. It also helps you see how much your bread is rising. Then later on, you'll also need a proofing basket, and it comes with a liner, but I just flour mine to get the pretty rings that you'll see at the end, and a Dutch oven. And you need an oven-safe Dutch oven that goes oven-safe up to about 500 degrees. I got this one at Macy's. It's a 4-quart, nothing too fancy, but it works. If you have a bigger size Dutch oven and that's all you have, it's totally fine. The bread just has a bit more room to spread out. So that's the situation. Let's get mixing and let's start making some bread. So to start out, I have my 375 grams of like 80-ish degree water, and I put them here in the bowl. Then I added in my 8 grams of yeast, and I let those guys hang out for a little bit, and there's bubbling action going on. There's a little bit of foam. I know we're good to go. Then the next thing you add is your all-purpose flour. That was 500 grams, and get that in there. You put that in first because you want to keep the salt just a little bit separate from the yeast if you can. Then I have my 10 grams of salt, and I've got those in, and now we get to mix. So this is where you get your hands a little bit dirty. And I do like a scooping motion with my hands and then like a pinch. So the combination of those two things should get you some nicely mixed bread. And it's gonna feel sticky and it's gonna feel a little icky, but in the book, Bread Baking for Beginners, she talks about how this is actually really important as you're just getting going to learn about dough hydration and to get the feel of dough. So I highly recommend using your hands instead of like a mixing spoon. But then you get to start to feel, all right, some things, you can tell when it's over hydrated, it's really hard to work with and it's just bleh, kind of a blob. And if it's not hydrated enough, it's a little more crumbly and it's also hard to work with. So you just start to mix this guy up. I'm gonna keep on mixing here. And then once you get it all mixed up, you let it hang out for about 20 minutes. This gives the gluten a chance to absorb some of that water and start to do its magic. Then we come back and we start to fold. And we'll zoom in and I'll show you those folds. But that's a technique instead of kneading. So this is a no-knead bread, and you use the folding method. This is one point though where your dough scraper will come in handy. Once you finish mixing, you can scrape off some of the excess dough into your bowl. We are ready to stretch and fold. So this is in place of kneading, and all you do is take the dough and you pick it up, stretch it, and fold it over. And you're gonna work your way, as she calls it in the book, around the clock. So just keep going around the circle, grab any extra little bits of dough, and then just stretch and fold. And you're gonna do this a couple of times around until you start to see it forming a nice tight ball. And you can see it comes together pretty quickly. And the point of this, the whole purpose, is so you can get some gluten development and get some structure in your bread. All right, we're starting to get it nice and tight. So all we do here is you cover it, either with this case I have a lid, or if you have like a towel, you could just flour that a little bit, cover this up, and then we let it hang out for 90 minutes. So for an hour and a half, this thing's gonna do its thing, and we'll check back in a little bit. The bread has been proofing for about an hour and a half, and you can see here when you look at the tub, it has increased in volume dramatically, which means we're probably good to go. This rising piece is a little more forgiving than this next part, which we're proofing. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna get the dough out of the tub or the bowl, whatever you have it in. We're gonna put it on a nice floured countertop. Then I'm going to show you how to fold, or how to shape it into like it's called like a letter fold. And then we will get it put in the proofing basket here. So I have all this ready to go. I'm going to show you how I get it out, and then we'll zoom in and I'll show you how we shape it. All right, so this is where your dough scraper comes in super handy, and you want to ease this out. Try to keep as much of the bubbly goodness going on as possible, but it does get kind of tricky to get it out of here. So just keep scraping along. All right, get it out onto the nice floured countertop. And then at this point, I just double check the bottom here. Get that all off, and then start to get it into a bit of a nicer shape here. And then I keep a little bowl of flour around so I can flour my hands. Okay, let's zoom in and get this thing shaped. Okay, we've got our dough laid out on the countertop, and give my hands a little more flour. And then all you simply do is you're going to bring in 1/2 of it into the middle without trying to not pop too many of the bubbles. Stretch it back over, fold it in. So then you're half done. Stretch this part in. And then there you go. You got a nice rounded rectangle, and then you turn it over onto its side here, and then getting rid of some of the flour, then you can start to pull the dough back, and you get some good surface tension on the dough, but you don't want to overshape it, so just gently pull it back. So I just kind of make my fingers like that and pull and tuck. Just do that around a few times, and then you got your proofing basket here. You take this thing, the smooth side goes down, and you just put it in the proofing basket. Cover it with a towel, and that's going to sit. So this can sit for up to an hour, hour and a half, but here in Denver at the altitude we are at, I do about 40 minutes. So we'll come back, I'll show you how to test it, and then it is time to get the bread baking. Okay, while your bread is proofing, one important thing you should be doing is your Dutch oven needs to be popped into your oven, and then you need to turn on your oven to 475. You want it to preheat for like at least 30 minutes with that Dutch oven in there. That way it gets really, really nice and hot, and the cast iron just absorbs all that heat. So get it preheated for at least 30 minutes. It's time to check to see if our bread is finished proofing. So the bread is now risen to the top of the proofing basket, which is a good sign. And if you press it and it feels like a marshmallow and it's still got a little bit of spring, that's about right. You can overproof bread, and I'll talk about that as we get going here. But key thing will be, now get out your nice hot preheated Dutch oven. Ooh, it's so hot. Get that guy out. Get the lid off so it's ready to go. Then you're going to tip this guy out onto your still somewhat floured countertop. And then I didn't mention this tool, but it's called a Lemay. Oh, it's got a little, maybe need to get a sharper razor there. It's called a Lemay. I made an X shape in the dough, and this is going to help it spring back out. And then I'm going to plop it in there and put the lid back on. So I tipped it out onto the floured surface, cut the shape with the Lemay, put it into the hot Dutch oven. Oops. Now we're going to bake it for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes with the lid on. So then we take the lid off at that time, and I won't show that piece, but I'll take it off about 30 minutes, and then for 15 more minutes, we'll bake it with the lid off. At that point, you should be able to see that it's got a big, beautiful golden crust. There should be some domage action happening where it's rounding itself up, going up, getting some nice spring. And then we have to let it cool. So we'll be back here in about 45 minutes after it's finished baking. Quick side note about this tool here. It's called a Lemay. It's spelled kind of lame, L-A-M-E. I got my first one in a pack with the proofing basket, the liner, this dough scraper, and I got a plastic Lemay. It's essentially a razor blade on a stick. And it worked great at first, and you can make that X shape or you can make like a square shape. Then recently I upgraded and got this nicer one, and it came with a set of razor blades. If you don't have essentially a fancy razor blade thing, you can just use a really sharp knife. Or you don't have to use one at all. That's the other thing. You could just let it naturally open up and see where all the cracks form. So it just helps to get the heat out and help with that oven spring. That's it, and that's a Lemay. Now, our bread has been in the oven for about 45 minutes. 30 with the lid on, and then another 15 with the lid off. So let's take it out and let's get it out of the, oh yeah. Get it out of the Dutch oven. Oh, it smells so good. All right, so my trick for getting it out of the Dutch oven is a very fancy spatula. Spatula. There we go. Spatula maneuver like that. So now it needs to cool. It needs to cool for around 30 minutes. Sometimes we only make it 15, but I mean, steam is still coming out of it. So 30 minutes is ideal to let the crumb really settle. And you can see we've got like the nice ring from the proofing basket. It has a nice opening. It's maybe a little flatter, so maybe I overproofed a little bit longer, but I mean, it's gonna taste delicious, and it smells divine. It's time. It is time to cut the bread. It has been cooling for, well over 30 minutes at this point, and it smells so good. So let's cut it open and have a taste and see how it is. This bread recipe is, it's super simple. It's a really good one to get started with, and I found this to be a way that I could build my bread baking skills, get to know dough, and really get good at bread. But it was when I found the poolish, that pre-ferment, that I just completely fell in love with that recipe and started making that one more frequently over this recipe. That is all up to you. It is all up to your personal preference. But as you get better and better at baking bread, I encourage you to play with some of those elements, like the amount of yeast and the fermentation time, and things like pre-ferments, like a poolish. It just adds a whole different complexity of flavor. But let's go ahead. Oh my goodness. It's so good. It's soft. The dough is nice and soft. It didn't rise as much as I thought it would. That could be because it might have gotten a little overproofed, or maybe I cut too deep into the dough at the top. But these are all kind of fun things about learning. You figure it out. You try different things each time, play with the variables ever so slightly, and get to know your bread. Okay. I hope you make this bread. I hope you enjoy it, and then I hope it's a good foray into the world of bread making. Enjoy.